Assalamu alaikum and welcome to another Saturday night dars. Inshallah, today we will be reading from the 23rd flash, which is about atheism in comparison to Islamic Tawheed, which is the oneness of Allah. Tonight's going to be a bit of a more difficult topic, but inshallah, if we all stay concentrated and we reread, we re-watch, Allah will allow it to be easier for us to comprehend and understand. The 23rd flash. O man, you should be aware that there are certain phrases which are commonly used and imply unbelief, kufr. So there is some phrases which we use which take us out of Islam, which make us disbelievers without us even knowing. The believers, the Muslims, also use these phrases without realizing their implications. So we do this, but we are unaware of the implications of the words that we are saying. We shall explain three of the most important of them. So here Ustad today is going to be covering three of these quotes, which are terms which take us out of Islam and which are used by atheists and disbelievers. And today I will be covering the third. It is natural, nature necessitates and creates it. So we do this a lot in our daily lives, where we claim that nature creates things, where nature has an effect. But indeed, this phrase of saying it is natural, it is nature necessitates and creates this, is actually a phrase of unbelief, and it implies disbelief in Allah Azza wa Jal. So today we'll be reading the third, and I'll be covering a few points. Nature necessitates it, nature makes it. This statement contains many impossibilities. So Said Nursi is going to break down that phrase, and he is going to break down naturalism and atheism with examples of using nature. First impossibility. If the arts and creativity, which are discerning and wise, to be seen in beings, and particularly in animate beings, are not attributed to Allah Azza wa Jal, and instead are attributed to nature and force, are attributed to a nature and force which is blind, deaf, and unthinking, it becomes necessary that nature either should have present in it every single machine and printing press for every single creation, or nature should include in everything power and wisdom enough to create and administer the universe. In order for nature to create this universe and administer it, it must have all-encompassing power and wisdom, alongside having machines and printing presses for every single type of creation. But as he said above, we cannot forget that nature is blind, is deaf, and unthinking. Nature does not have a mind. The sun's manifestation, the actual sun in the sky's manifestation, its reflection, appears in all small fragments of glass and droplets on the face of the earth. The sun appears in reflection form in all fragments of glass. If we have a piece of glass and we hold it up to the sky, a miniature sun will form inside the glass. If those miniature reflected imaginary suns, so that sun inside that glass, that reflection of the sun, is not given to the sun in the sky, it is necessary for you who accepts the sun inside of that small glass must accept the actual sun in every tiny fragment of glass smaller than a match head, which possesses the sun's qualities and which, through small in size, bears profound meaning, and therefore to accept actual suns to the number of pieces of glass. So if you actually believe that that reflection in that piece of glass is not the sun in the sky, you must believe that the sun is in every single tiny fragment of glass with its heat, with its wisdom, with the way it heats. You must accept that each piece of glass has a separate sun inside of it apart from the one in the sky. So there is a multitude of suns. Every single reflection is a sun. In the exact same way, if creatures are not attributed directly to the manifestation of Allah Azza wa Jal's creation and His names, it becomes necessary to accept that in each being, that in each creation, there lies a nature, a force, or quite simply a God that will sustain an infinite will and power, knowledge and wisdom. If we believe that creatures have been created by nature, we must also believe that in each of those creatures it is necessary to accept that inside of that creature there is a nature, a force, or quite simply a God that will sustain an infinite power and will and knowledge and wisdom. Such an idea that nature, which is blind, deaf and unthinking, which has no mind, is absurd to believe that nature can create a creature. It demonstrates that a man who attributes the art of the Creator, it demonstrates that a man who attributes the art of Allah Azza wa Jal, His creations, to imaginary, insignificant, unconscious nature, is without less conscious of the truth than an animal. Here Ustad has explained simply, if we do not ascribe all the creatures being created to Allah, we must accept that individual gods must be present in every single creature. Individual natural causes, nature must be present in every single creature for them to be created. And this is the most absurd and superstitious thinking pattern of all impossibilities in the universe. In short, just as it is impossible and precluded for the necessarily existent one for Allah to have any partner or like in His respect, of his essence. So too is the interference of others in his rulership, in his dominicality, and his creation of beings impossible and precluded. So just as there is only one Allah Azza wa Jal, and there is no sharik, he does not have a partner, nor a son, there is nothing that can impact, that can have a say in how things are created. Nothing can interfere with his creation. As for the difficulties involved in the second possibility, as is proved in the many parts of the Risale-i Nur, if all things, if all creation is attributed to the single one of unity, to Allah Azza wa Jal, all things become as easy and trouble-free as one thing. For Allah, it is easy for Him to create the whole spring just as He can create one flower. For Allah Azza wa Jal, this does not matter. Whereas for us, if we were to make different car parts, it would take us an unbelievable amount of time to put it all together. Whereas for Allah Azza wa Jal, because He is the only one without anyone interfering into His work, He is able to create everything as easily as if He can create one thing. Whereas if they are attributed, so if we do not attribute to Allah Azza wa Jal and we attribute to causes and to nature, a single thing becomes as difficult as all things. This has been demonstrated with numerous decisive proofs, and a summary of them is as follows. If a man is connected to the king by being a soldier or his official or his representative, by reason of the strength of the connection, by reason of the strength of his connection, he may perform duties far exceeding his individual strength. He may be able to do things which he may not be able to do on his own, but this is all because of the strength of that connection. This can be understood with one policeman being able to stop a whole road. Even though he is one man, by using his connection to a bigger authority such as the police, he is able to stop a whole road of traffic just by showing that he is a part and has a connection to that higher authority. He may on occasion capture another king in the name of his own king, for he himself does not carry the equipment and sources of strength necessary to carry out the duties and works he performs, nor is he compelled to do so. By reason of the connection, by reason of that connection to a higher power source, the king's treasuries, the army which is behind him, supporting him, carry his equipment and sources of strength. That is to say, each of the duties he performs may be as grand as the business of a king and as tremendous as the actions of an army. Here Ustad Said Nursi is showing us that the true power in the human form, the true power in creation, is knowing that we have a connection with Allah Azza wa Jal. Without Allah, if we do not have Allah in our strength, as our core strength, we are actually left to our own devices where we can't even control our own body. But by the means of connection, we rise to Alai Illin, where we become the vicegerents of the whole world and carry supplication and actually manifest Allah Azza wa Jall's names. Indeed, through being unofficial, an ant, a small ant, destroyed Fir'aun's palace. Through the connection, a fly killed Nimrud off. And through the connection, the seed of a pine, the size of a grain of wheat, the seed of the pine tree, produces all the parts of a huge pine tree. A small pine tree seed, which is the size of a grain, carries a huge pine tree. If the connection to the strength source is severed and the man is discharged from his duties as an official, he will be compelled to carry the equipment and sources of strength necessary for his work himself. If that certain police officer, which was stopping traffic just before in the example I gave, was stripped of his police badge and his title, he would not be able to stop the traffic. Just as if I stepped out onto the road right now, I would not be able to stop the traffic because people would not listen to me because I am not strong. He will then only be able to perform duties commensurating with the sources of strength and ammunition he is able to do himself. He will only be able to do the things which he is capable of doing. If he is required in this situation to carry out his duties with the extreme ease of the first situation, it will be necessary to load on his back the sources of an army's strength, the arsenal, the ammunition factories of the king. So if I went outside today onto the road and tried to stop people, I would have to build up the strength of all the police force in order for me to do that one thing, which is impossible. Even clowns who invent stories and superstitions to make people laugh would be ashamed at this fanciful idea. In short, to attribute all beings to the necessarily existent one is so easy as to be necessary, while to attribute their creation to nature is so difficult as to be impossible and outside the realm of reason. The third impossibility. A wild savage entered a palace which had been built in an empty desert and completed and adorned with all the fruits of civilization. So a desert was present, and right in the middle of a desert where there is no civilization, there was built a perfect palace having adorned all the fruits of civilization. He cast an eye over its interior. He looked inside and saw thousands of well-proportioned and artistically fashioned objects. So there was a desert with no civilization, and then right in the middle of the desert there was a palace, and that palace contained all the buildings and architectural developments from all civilizations, all in one place, in that one palace, with its interior consisting of thousands of well-proportioned and artistically fashioned objects. Out of his boorishness and the lack of his own intelligence, he said, "No one from outside had a hand in this. One of the objects from inside must have made this palace together with all of its contents." He said, "No one from outside this palace could have created it. It must be from inside. And one of those must be inside the palace. And he started to investigate. But it did not appear possible, even to his untaught intelligence, that anything he had looked at could have made those feelings. Later, he saw a notebook in which he had been written a plan. He saw a notebook inside of the palace which had a plan and program of the palace's construction. The notebook was an index of its contents, rules for its administration and day-to-day housekeeping. For sure, the notebook too, which was without hands, eye, or implementing ability, creating ability, like the rest of the objects in the palace, was completely lacking the ability to construct and decorate the palace. Even though the book contained all the information about the palace, it could not create the palace itself. But since he saw that in comparison with all the other things, with all the other fashionable instruments inside, the furniture inside of the palace, by looking inside and comparing it with them, the notebook was related to the whole palace by reason of its including all its theoretical laws. He was obliged to say, because the book itself had all the laws, had all the plans, had all the programs of administration of the palace, the man had no other option to say, there, it is this notebook that has organized, ordered, and adorned the palace. It has fashioned, the book has fashioned all these objects and sent them in their places. That book created the whole palace and set everything up one by one. The man was led to believe this. He transformed his uncouthness into ludicrous jabber. Thus, now Ustad Said Nursi is going to be explaining how this relates to our current world. Thus, exactly like this comparison, a naturalist, an idealist, an atheist, which denies God, entered the palace of this world, of this universe, which is infinitely more well ordered, more perfect, and everywhere full of miraculous instances of wisdom than the palace in comparison. Not thinking that it was the work of art of the necessarily existent one, who is outside the sphere of contingency. The atheist shuns that idea. He saw a collection of the laws of divine practice. We see the index of dominical arts, which are like the slates for writing and erasing of divine determining qadr in the sphere of contingency, and like a constantly changing notebook for the laws of the functioning of divine power, and are extremely mistakenly and erroneously given the name of nature. I'll go over this part again. Not thinking that it was the work of the necessarily existent one, who is outside the sphere of contingency. Man sees a collection of laws of divine practice and an index of divine dominical art, which are like a slate, a place where Allah Azza wa Jal can create, change, influence, He created nature for us to see the embodiment of all His names and its manifestations. Yet we have given the name of nature, which is an utter and erroneous mistake. These things require a cause, and nothing else appears to have the relationship with everything that this notebook has. It is the true reason will in no accept that an unseen, unconscious and powerless notebook could carry out this creation, which is the work of an absolute dominicality, absolute rulership, and requires infinite power. But since you do not recognize the eternal Maker, the most plausible explanation is to say nature has created it. To which I shall reply, you mistaken unfortunate, your foolishness exceeds anything imaginable. Lift your head out of the swamp of nature and look beyond yourself. Lift your head out of the swamp of nature and look beyond yourself. See an all-glorious Maker, to whom all beings from particles to planets testify with their different tongues, and to whom they point with their fingers. To see that nature is actually pointing us towards Allah Azza wa Jal and showing us that it is an utter manifestation and creation of Allah Azza wa Jal and His names. Behold the manifestation of the pre-eternal inscriber, who fashions the palace and who writes its program in the notebook, this world. Study His decree, study nature, listen to the Quran, remember Allah Azza wa Jal, and understand that nature is His works and His manifestation and His creation. Listen to the Quran, be delivered from your delirious raving. Thank you for joining us for another Saturday night dars. It's been a bit intense and I'm sure it was a bit heavy. Inshallah, I hope that I did my best in reading my part, and we can all actually benefit from this chapter. That was a 23rd flash. If anyone would like to continue reading, Allah Al-Fatiha.